Welcome to another edition of the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. I'm Donald Grodoff, family coach with FamilyOCD.com and FocusedHealthyFamily.com. In the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast series, I delve into the hidden characteristics of OCD, anxiety, and anxiety disorders. The things that most people don't see, that are behind closed doors and shut within the mind about anxiety. My goal with these podcasts is to bring about awareness of obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. Understand that I am not a doctor, therapist, or counselor, and the content, information, resources, and ideas that are talked about and brought up here in these podcasts are things that I have used, discovered, or have been recommended to me, and I always recommend to seek additional professional help in finding solutions for yourself. Thank you for listening and enjoy the podcast. This podcast was recorded May 15, 2017. This is podcast number 8 called 5 Speeds of the Brain. Last podcast we talked about enhancing the sponge years. And we talked about how important it is to develop the brain by getting good nutrition, right atmosphere, even during pregnancy. And then giving those years when the children are taking in everything in the environment, giving them the best environment possible. So what I want to talk about, I think it's important when we're talking about any kind of anxiety, and OCD is a high anxiety disorder, we have to talk about what goes on in the brain. And I do it in a pretty simplistic mode here, but I want to talk about what I call the 5 speeds of the brain. We know it as the 5 brain waves, and they are: first is gamma, and that's what I call the project deadline wave. That's the one that gives you energy, that powers you up. Let's say you have a project due, and it's due tomorrow because you've put off. A lot of times kids do it. They put it off till the night before, or they put it off till a couple days before, and they have to get it done. They've got a deadline to hit, and they want to really amp it up. The gamma gives you the adrenaline. It gives you the energy that you need to be able to really get it done, to push yourself to get it done, the strength and get it done. Then we move down into the beta. I call the beta the everyday schedule brainwave. It's the one that gives you the more energy to be able to make it through your day, to get through your schedule of stuff to do that day, but it's not hyping you up too much. The next one is the alpha wave, and that is the wave that we're supposed to be on most of the time. That is the balancing wave. That is the calm Zen Buddha wave, I call it. And it's the peaceful, very calm, alert but calm place. Then we move down into theta, and theta is your go to bed, getting ready for bed mode. It is the wind down to getting into deep sleep. And then finally the delta, and that's the deep sleep, the restorative sleep that's so utterly important, especially as we talked about the sponge years, and we talked about even the pregnant mother, how important good sleep is in restoring the body's daily activities, daily functions. So that it becomes a very important wave for us to be in and to get in during the sleep times of our days. And unfortunately nowadays, especially with all the electronics and everything else, that is a very hard place to be. So here's what is supposed to happen in the brain in a natural place. The natural brain flows between all of those waves as needed. So if you do have that project that you need to get done, you can flow up into the gamma, or into beta, depending on how urgent it is, I guess. And then when you're done, you flow back out, hopefully back into like an alpha state or at least a beta state. And that allows you to be able to perform the tasks that you need to get done and do them efficiently. It gives you the choice of which one to go into, which of those waves is going to be what you need at that moment, and it gives you flexibility to be able to flow around between those. Now, what happens in anxiety, and I believe we talked about this in previous podcasts, but it becomes fight or flight, which knocks us up into that gamma mode, which keeps us in that alert, attentive, hyperactive place where we're supposed to be for temporary spots, but not on a regular basis. And so we get stuck. The gear shift that shifts us between those, that gets that flow between the brain, gets stuck in one of those positions, in one of those places. And now I'll give you some examples. And again, understand, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, but this is what I've seen and some of the things I have learned, and I'm putting them into pretty much layman's terms, simplistic terms. But as an example, we're talking about OCD and the anxiety that's behind it. Well, those are stuck up in a place of gamma, where it's hyperactive. The fight or flight situation's going on where parts of the brain are being shut down. Immune system, thinking, creative part of the brain gets shut down. And same time, it's building up adrenaline, cortisol, those things that keep us, that are made to get us strong and give us energy to be able to literally fight or to run. So we're getting stuck up in that gamma. Now, an interesting thing that I've just within the last couple of years learned, I thought was very interesting. I never thought about it. Many times we talk about the ADHD a lot of times is stuck up in that gamma place where it's just in a really tough, hyperactive place. But something like ADD, which is not hyperactive, can sometimes be down more in a theta mode. And theta is that foggy place, that dreamy kind of drifting off to sleep place. And so an ADD person can be foggy versus hyperactive. So they just can't get their mind clear because it's kind of fogged over, kind of slept over. So those are just a couple of examples of how that stuck brain can work. Now, let's talk about some ways to get that flow back. Again, I go back to proper nutrition because, again, the stomach, the gut, and brain connection is huge. And I don't think people realize how much what they put in the gut, what they put in the stomach, affects the brain and how it operates. And if it's not operating right, it's going to kick into that anxiety place. So it's very important to do the proper nutrition. And I've talked a lot about this. The next is good deep sleep. And here is where I find that a lot of people, especially in this electronic age of ours, are not getting down into the deepest sleep, the restorative sleep that they need. And thus, all of these things really is just a circular kind of thing. You don't get enough sleep, so you wake up and you're tired, which leads to anxiety, which leads to less sleep. It just plays on itself over and over. And one of the things you can, to me, we have to start really paying attention to is how we are around electronics at night. Putting that screen in front of our eyes, that light from that screen can play with the brain's ability to get into the theta and into the delta wave. It pretends like it's daytime because it sees that much light. And so you don't get yourself into theta, which allows you to get prepared to get into delta, to work your way into that deep sleep. The electronics play a huge role. What I see would be the best type of way to get to sleep is to be able, about 2 hours before you go to bed, you're taking time to maybe just read, take a good hot bath or a hot shower, do something that is less taxing on the brain to be able to get yourself early into theta and then down into beta. I'm sorry, down into delta. So I think that is vital, and I think we need to really, as a society, look at what we're doing late at night, because too many people are on that phone or on that screen, and it's keeping them up. Plus, some of the things we eat, the caffeine that we drink, all of that play a role in this that we really have to think about. The next thing is exercise. Again, the same thing, getting our body out, getting movement going. Movement can be a therapy all by itself. And as we know from as infants, movement was vitally important to the development of the neural pathways of the brain. And it doesn't stop just at infancy. Our movement can actually help recalculate and repath the brain. There's certain exercises. I do a lot of work with brain gym, and so I believe that movement can help. Plus, getting out, getting air, fresh air, getting sunlight, all of those things play a huge role. The next one is brain stimulation, and there's some simple things that you can do to keep yourself active. Something simple as doing puzzles can keep your brain stimulated. Puzzles. I do Scrabble. I love Scrabble, and I think it's important, again, to activate your mind, have it calculate, have it do a project, put a project together, things like that that keeps the mind stimulated. I talk about part of that is doing creative activities. Even things as simple as writing with the opposite hand of what your natural writing abilities are. Every once in a while getting some crayons out. Even as an adult, there are now adult drawing books, which I think is really great, but most people think that's childish. But I think it can be very important to have that creative part of being able to do something. If you're right-handed, do it with your left hand, and do something that's out of the box, like getting a box of crayons out, playing with Play-Doh, things that can be sensory, that can help you move your hands. And again, it goes into these different games that you can even do, puzzles, math problems, word scrambles, Scrabble, all of that. Relaxation is another one. We do not relax enough. We are kind of a hyper society as a whole. And we have a hard time, many people have a hard time, just taking even 10 minutes out of their day to do nothing but sit back, take deep breaths, and relax. It is, again, vitally important that we give our body time to relax. We can run our cars and run them and run them and run them, but if we don't take care of them, if we don't let them rest some, they're going to wear out faster. And the same is true for us, and even more so. So another activity we can do for the brain, of course, is the alpha stim, which is the device. In fact, as I speak, I have it clipped to me because I like to keep my brain revitalized. And the alpha stim does that. It's a device that I use with my clients. I also sell it. It is a device that is sending multiple frequencies into the brain very gently, not a shock treatment. And in doing that, it has helped to repath the brain paths that we have up there that may be out of sync, the frequencies that are out of sync that need to be rebalanced. And one does wonders. It does, I almost like to say it does miracles, because I've seen it work for pain, insomnia, depression, and anxiety, and all the realms around that. Another one, and I talk about this one because this is what I do, and I'm going to do a podcast specifically on it at one point, but it's EFT, Emotional Freedom Techniques, better known as tapping. And that is where I am trained and have my certificate in, is emotional freedom techniques or tapping. Very similar to acupuncture, just without the needles. And it does wonders to bring down anxiety, fight or flight, and all of that. And of course, finally, the other thing that can be used is medications. And as I do what I do, I'm doing it naturally. I'm doing it in a non-medical format, without medication. And at one point in my life, I was an anti-medication person because I just didn't feel like it were made for us and doing the things they need to do. But since my heart attack in 2011, I've changed my view on it and understand how important the medical world is and how important medicine is and can be. I just believe that it has to be used in a process that is necessary. And so I always like to use it as last resort. And I want to make sure, as we have tried to do with our kids and with ourselves, is to make sure we're taking the right medicines at the right time for the right reason, and that they are not causing such deep side effects that it's actually hurting us more than it's helping us. So I do believe in the medical world. I believe there's some wonderful doctors out there, wonderful nurses, all of that. But I do believe that it is to be more of a last resort or an emergency situation, and that the alternative world and the medical world will hopefully someday blend beautifully, because they both have so many things to offer that we need to realize as a society. And that's one of the reasons I do this podcast, is to get out the message that things can be done blended beautifully with medicine to work so much better. So that is it for right now for this podcast. I hope that this has been helpful to understand the flow of the brain and how it basically operates. Now, understand basic, because again, this is very much in layman's terms. I always suggest, as I do in this, to seek other medical professional help in what you're doing. But I hope this has been helpful. Thank you. This concludes this podcast. Please remember to leave comments for me, because that really helps me to understand what you're looking for and helps give me fodder for the next possible podcast. Also, I'd love to hear your invisible wheelchair story if you're willing to share it. If you are, feel free to go to invisiblewheelchair.com and click on Tell Your Story. Now, if you've heard these things and you feel like you need further assistance or some help in what you're going through, and you want to spend some time with me working through those issues, then feel free to book a session at focusedhealthyfamily.com or familyocd.com, or simply call me at 704-562-1630. Finally, don't forget there is a tap-in recording following this podcast you may want to take advantage of. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast and will join me for the next one. Remember, keep tapping, talking, and transcending your life into new heights. Thank you, and have a great day.